Hello and welcome back to NPA Discovery, the place where we uncover the untold stories behind the celebrities we think we know. Today, we revisit one of the most chilling and tragic stories in Hollywood history, one that has left an indelible scar on the American psyche, the story of Sharon Tate. But today, we go beyond the headlines, beyond the horrific crime that took her life, and dive into the vibrant, complex, and beautiful existence of a woman who was more than a victim. She was an actress, a daughter, a sister, a friend, and an expectant mother whose light was stolen too soon. The title of this video is not just about a murder. It's about how the brief spark of a promising life still manages to light flames of remembrance, sorrow, and admiration. If you believe stories like these deserve to be told with the dignity they command, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. It helps us continue bringing these powerful narratives to you. Sharon Marie Tate was born on January 24, 1943, in Dallas, Texas. From the very beginning, she lived a life of movement and transition. As the daughter of Colonel Paul James Tate, her family moved constantly due to military assignments. In just her first 16 years, she attended multiple high schools and lived in 6 different cities. While some children thrive on stability, Tate grew up constantly adapting, learning how to connect quickly and deeply. But always with the underlying knowledge that change was just around the corner. Despite her beauty, and it was stunning, even at a young age, Sharon was not a stereotypical it girl. Friends and family remember her as shy, often reserved, and unassuming. But something changed when she stepped onto a stage. There, the quiet girl became radiant. It wasn't just the spotlight that made her shine, it was her genuine spirit, her emotional honesty, and a gentleness that drew people in. Even as a toddler, the world seemed to notice. At just 6 months old, she won the title of Miss Tiny Tot of Dallas. But it wasn't until her teenage years that she began to embrace her public presence. In 1959 alone, she won 5 beauty pageants, an astonishing feat that showcased not just her looks, but her poise, charm, and increasing self-confidence. But perhaps the most defining chapter of her early life began when her family was stationed in Verona, Italy. It was there that Sharon began making real friendships, felt a sense of belonging, and even landed a feature on the cover of Stars and Stripes, the military magazine. For the first time, she saw herself not just as a background figure in her own life, but as someone worth seeing. In Italy, Sharon's first brush with Hollywood wasn't just fate, it was serendipity. A film called Hemingway's Adventures of a Young Man was being shot nearby, and Sharon, curious and full of wonder, ended up as an extra. It was there she met actor Richard Beymer, who not only became a short-term love interest but also the first person to suggest she pursue acting professionally. Even so, Sharon remained humble. Her response to her beauty was refreshingly grounded. "Sexiness is all in the eye of the beholder," she once said. "I think my appeal, whatever it might be, isn't obvious. At least, not to me." Returning to the United States, Sharon began grinding away at Hollywood's hard pavement. Her progress was slow and riddled with obstacles. She landed small roles on TV shows like The Beverly Hillbillies and Mr. Ed, and though her agent, Martin Ransohoff, was initially cautious about exposing her to bigger roles, he couldn't hold her back forever. Eventually, he cast her in Eye of the Devil, a thriller where her presence alone lit up the screen. Even the skeptical director, J. Lee Thompson, who had a backup plan to replace her, quickly changed his tune after seeing her raw talent unfold in front of the camera. But behind every professional win were personal struggles. Her engagement to French actor Philippe Forquet was as passionate as it was turbulent. Their love burned bright and fast but couldn't survive the pressures of 2 demanding careers. Not long after, Sharon dated celebrity hairstylist Jay Sebring. Though she turned down his marriage proposal, they remained lifelong friends, a bond that would tragically unite them on the night of her death. When Sharon met Roman Polanski, it wasn't love at first sight. He was intense, demanding, and famously difficult. She was light, gentle, and idealistic. Their personalities clashed at first, but perhaps that's why they eventually fell so hard for each other. Sharon was cast in Polanski's The Fearless Vampire Killers, and soon after, she was also cast in His Life. Polanski was known for being controlling, and Sharon was not spared from this side of him. He had her redo scenes as many as 70 times, pushing her to limits she didn't even know she could reach. But she delivered. She always did. Their marriage in 1968 was glamorous and deeply unconventional. Hollywood's golden couple lived a whirlwind life filled with art, friends, fame, and secrets. It was no secret among their circle that Roman had an eye for other women, and Sharon, though heartbroken, once quipped, "We have a good arrangement. Roman lies to me, and I pretend to believe him." By the time Sharon Tate reached the peak of her short career, the world was starting to notice her not just for her captivating beauty but for her commitment to the craft. There was something unpolished, raw, and human about her presence on screen. She didn't demand the spotlight, she quietly earned it. Yet even as she gained more roles, more interviews, and more headlines, one painful truth lingered: the industry still underestimated her. Take her role in Valley of the Dolls, a film that would ultimately go on to achieve cult status. Sharon didn't love the source material. In fact, she confided in Roman Polanski that she wasn't impressed by the script. But she took the role anyway, hoping that the exposure would lead to something greater. That tells us something profound about Sharon: she was a realist. She understood how Hollywood worked, and she was willing to play the game, even when she didn't believe in it. But playing the game didn't mean she would lose her authenticity. Unfortunately, Valley of the Dolls became one of the most difficult experiences of her career. Director Mark Robson was reportedly cold and critical toward the actresses, especially Sharon. Patty Duke later revealed that Robson often treated Tate like a child, someone not worthy of complex direction. It was an insult not just to her talent but to her dignity. And yet, like so many times before, she bore it gracefully. She pushed forward, gave her best performance, and even earned a Golden Globe nomination for New Star of the Year. That speaks volumes. On the surface, Sharon's life looked like a dream. In 1968, just before her 25th birthday, she married Roman Polanski. Their wedding, held in London, was glamorous, star-studded, and seemed to mark the beginning of a cinematic power couple. But as often happens in Hollywood, the fairy tale had shadows. Despite the public adoration, their private life wasn't as idyllic. Roman, famously brilliant and equally notorious for his egotism, wasn't a devoted partner in the traditional sense. Sharon, who longed for stability and sincerity, had to endure Roman's open infidelity. Her friends recalled that she often confided in them, saying bitterly, "We have a good arrangement, Roman lies to me, and I pretend to believe him." This wasn't a woman naive to her situation. She was heartbroken but tried to preserve what she had, especially as she approached motherhood, and yet, despite the disillusionment, Sharon was not a victim of her relationship. She was intelligent, witty, and quietly strong. When Sharon and Roman moved into their new home at 10050 Cielo Drive, she called it her love house. Nestled in the hills of Benedict Canyon, the home was beautiful, open, and filled with promise. She was overjoyed, expecting her first child, surrounded by friends, with her career on an upward trajectory. She had even become close again with her former lover, Jay Sebring, now just a dear friend and regular guest. He remained loyal to her to the very end, but as fate would have it, the address held a dark past. The house had formerly been rented by music producer Terry Melcher, whom Charles Manson had tried to impress with a music demo. Melcher had dismissed Manson, refusing him a record deal. That rejection planted the seed of vengeance in Manson's mind. And although Melcher had moved out, Manson still associated the home with the humiliation he felt. What followed is now one of the darkest chapters in American history. On August 8, 1969, while Roman Polanski was overseas working on a film, Sharon Tate invited close friends over for a quiet evening. It was meant to be a night of laughter, conversation, and preparing for the baby. She was only 2 weeks from her due date. What happened next is almost too cruel for words. Members of the Manson family broke into the house and murdered Sharon, her friend Abigail Folger, Folger's boyfriend Wojtek Frykowski, Jay Sebring, and a visitor named Stephen Parent. Sharon pleaded for her unborn son's life. She begged them to let her live long enough to give birth. But her pleas fell on ears too twisted, too lost to madness. The brutality of the crime stunned the world. The media descended on the case like vultures. Rumors, misinformation, and tabloid frenzy followed. But amid all the noise, one unbearable truth stood above the rest: Sharon Tate had been taken too soon. Sharon's father, Colonel Paul Tate, was devastated. But he didn't crumble. He stepped into action, using his military intelligence background to assist investigators and pursue justice. He was relentless. He even attended parole hearings well into his later years, ensuring that none of the convicted killers ever had the chance to breathe free air again. His famous statement about Charles Manson still echoes, that man should never, never, never be turned out into society. Doris Tate, Sharon's mother, became a fierce advocate for victims' rights. Her work led to changes in California law and brought national attention to victims' families. President George H.W. Bush honored her in 1992, just before her own passing. When she died, her daughter Patty picked up the mantle. And after Patty's tragic death from cancer in 2000, the legacy passed on to Sharon's other sister, Deborah. The Tate women were not just survivors, they were warriors. Roman Polanski never truly recovered from Sharon's death. Though his later life would be marred by controversy and scandal, he did one thing that remained deeply human: he mourned her. In the wake of her murder, he reportedly gave away all his possessions. Years later, he directed the film Tess, a project Sharon had wanted to adapt before her death. The dedication at the beginning of the film reads simply, "For Sharon." That quiet tribute may have been his last honest offering to the woman he once called the happiest part of his life. Today, the house on Cielo Drive no longer exists. It was torn down in 1994, and the street number changed in an attempt to erase the past. But you can't tear down a memory. Sharon's story, her beauty, her kindness, her vulnerability, her fight to be more than just a pretty face, still resonates. Her final resting place includes not just her own name but the name of her unborn son, Paul Richard Polanski. A child who never got to take his first breath, but whose name ensures he will never be forgotten. After Sharon's murder, for a time, Hollywood seemed paralyzed. The entire film industry reeled from the news. The illusion of safety was shattered. Stars hired private security, some even left the country temporarily. But Sharon's image remained, frozen in time, eternal, and slowly, through film retrospectives, biographies, and pop culture references, Sharon Tate became something more than a victim. She became a muse. Her ethereal screen presence, that soft voice, the almost contradictory mix of innocence and sensuality, future generations of actresses would try to emulate that balance. Directors, especially those with an eye for nostalgia, frequently referenced her work in Valley of the Dolls, Eye of the Devil, and The Fearless Vampire Killers. She wasn't the polished dramatic actress she aspired to be yet, but she had the kind of screen charisma you can't teach. Her naturalness foreshadowed the modern acting styles we see today: subtle, expressive, emotionally open. Then came Quentin Tarantino. In 2019, Tarantino released Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Sharon Tate was placed front and center. Not as a ghost, not as a martyr, but as a living, breathing woman full of joy, humor, and hope. Margot Robbie played Sharon with stunning restraint. There were long scenes where she simply listened, smiled, or danced, no dialogue, no exposition. Just a presence. And in those quiet moments, we saw what was taken from the world. There's a scene where Sharon goes to a movie theater to watch herself on the big screen. She smiles shyly at the audience reacting to her performance. In that moment, we don't see Sharon the victim, we see Sharon the dreamer. The girl who wanted to make people laugh. The woman who dared to step out from under the shadow of her beauty and ask to be taken seriously. It was Tarantino's way of rewriting history, not just through fantasy, as the film does, but through compassion. He gave her back her voice, her agency, and her happiness. Sharon Tate's legacy also lives on in the efforts of her family, especially her sister Deborah Tate. For decades, Deborah has worked to shift the public perception of Sharon from a murder victim to a vibrant, multidimensional woman. Deborah created the official Sharon Tate website, curates her sister's memorabilia, and has given countless interviews where she shares intimate memories of Sharon, her goofy sense of humor, her love for animals, her habit of singing at the top of her lungs around the house. In 2014, Deborah published Sharon Tate, Recollection, a photo book full of rare and personal snapshots, letters, and journal entries. It wasn't about glamour or gossip, it was about grounding Sharon's memory in reality. Real stories. Real smiles. Real loss. Deborah once said, Sharon had a light about her. It's my job to keep that light from going out. And she has done exactly that. Sharon's death marked the end of the 1960s age of innocence. It was the era of free love, but it was also an era of war, rebellion, and social upheaval. Her murder was so shocking, so random, that it felt like a cruel metaphor for the entire decade falling apart, and yet, in retrospect, Sharon has come to symbolize something else: the need for grace in the face of chaos. She's remembered not for angry outbursts, not for tabloid drama, not for public feuds. She's remembered for her kindness, her soft voice, her belief that she could make a name for herself. Not just as a beautiful woman, but as a real artist. And in that quiet determination, she embodied something timeless. Sharon Tate never got the chance to show us all that she could do. Her filmography, though brief, was the opening chapter of what could have been a legendary career. But maybe her real role wasn't one captured by a camera, maybe it was the way she moved people. The way she inspired friends, lovers, and audiences alike to see the human behind the Hollywood starlet. She wasn't a femme fatale, or a bombshell, or a Barbie. She was a complex, intelligent, funny, deeply emotional woman who made the best of the world she was given, even when that world wasn't always kind in return. In the end, Sharon Tate remains frozen at age 26, young, glowing, full of promise. But she's not just frozen in a photo or a frame of film. She's alive in the work she left behind, in the causes her family championed, in every story that dares to remember her not for how she died, but for how she lived. So let us say this, with reverence and clarity, Sharon Tate was not just a victim. She was a voice, a vision, a soul that sparkled, and long after the headlines fade and the myths grow quiet, her light endures. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful story. If Sharon's journey touched your heart, please consider giving this video a like, leaving your thoughts in the comments, and subscribing to the channel. These human stories deserve to be told, and remembered. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and never forget to honor the light in others.